which is not or JFK is. But once I got over that, it felt like home.
Speaking of, it's hard to get to JFK. Like it's like compared to like LaGuardia or like even Newark, it's hard. It's like, is this
Yeah.
still the same city? Anyway, um, what? This isn't on the question list, but tell me about Daydreamer, the impetus, the cover. How'd you get an agent? Because this is your debut book.
Yeah,
You've been
yeah.
like, you've had stories published, but this is your debut novel.
Yeah, it's funny, anybody who's watching who's an author, they know how long it takes to write a book and get it all the way from beginning to end. So in that time, Daydreamer was teaching me how to write as I was writing, getting other stuff published. But when I moved to New York City, a good friend of mine said, "Hey, you spend so much time on your Dungeons and Dragons. Why, why don't you actually try and turn this into something else?" And they introduced me to this place in New York called KGB, Fantastic Fiction. And around the same, that's where if you're from New York City, you want to write speculative fiction, fantasy, it's kind of like a mecca, like all the authors go to get a drink and meet each other and read in Manhattan. And so I was invited to that and had a fantastic time at Ellen, Datlow, who runs it. And then around the same time, I joined Brooklyn Speculative Fiction Writers, which is still well, at the time, it was the only speculative fiction writing fantasy group that was actually meeting in New York City regularly. But then, like now, like what, 15 years later, we are the largest and most active, still working. As a matter of fact, that's where I met Phenderson. Phenderson also was BSFW. When he gets here, well, I'll wait when he gets here to tell the story. But then I started working on Daydreamer, which started off as a short story. And then the characters just kind of began to live with me, and I said, "Oh no, this is definitely more than 5,000 words," and it's kept on going and going and going. And so, over the course of I want to say 8, 9 years, I put it through my writers group, and in that time, I found my agent Barry, because of just nose to the grindstone, doing that work, looking for agents and making connections to people like Fran Wild, who said, "Hey, I think my agent would like your book." And then we connected there, and he in fact did like the book. And then the whole process of finding an editor, Lisa Abrams, a Random House Labyrinth Press. They're always looking for books. It's a new imprint, and they're always looking for books that are doing something different, which are going to tell I don't say more important stories, but a little more serious stories. To try to hit a little closer to home and try to push some boundaries there. So Lisa Abrams was definitely the editor for me, and we got along fantastically. And so the book kind of was born of that process. And there's a whole lot of stuff I'm sure we'll talk about later on about my own life and being a teacher and my degree in linguistics all kind of mixes together to become what is now Daydreamer. That
I
was a whole lot of words.
love all of that. I love how you connected to community. I did not know about the Brooklyn Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers Association. Like, I'm like, the next time I'm in New York, I don't write, but I want to hang out with the cool kids.
Oh, absolutely.
So send me an invite. So I love that. I love how you found your agent, like a friend of a friend. Like, I'm
Mhm.
used to like the whole cloning process.
Yeah.
Yay!
I'm
Yay,
here.
I'm
How you
here.
doing?
What's up, man?
Good.
What's your video?
What's
Or
that?
is it just I can't see your video, but
Oh,
everyone else can see it.
I got to share the video. Boom.
No, I can
You
see your
see it?
video.
Okay, good. Then it's working.
Well, I can't see
It's
it, so
yeah. So like Instagram,
I,
there's some
you
kind of
can't.
weird
What's
thing.
going on?
hey, what's up,
Um,
homie?
people in the world can see all of us.
Okay.
Hey,
Okay.
Erica, how are you?
Nice. Nice.
Oh, I'm good. I'm also reading the comments. Y'all probably know Erica. They have probably reviewed some of your work for Publishers Weekly. Erica also lives in New York.
Okay.
Um,
Erica,
so
who?
yeah, Erica, Hardison.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Hi, Erica.
uh, yeah. Anyway, so yay. Rob just did. Rob, do you want me to call you Rob?
Yeah,
You want
go
me to
for it.
call you
Yeah,
Cameron?
I will
Okay.
do.
Um, Rob just finished their self-introduction. So, Peter Jelly Clark,
Yeah.
Fenderson, what do you
Yeah.
want me?
Uh, oh, which of those? It's all a pen name. So I mean, yeah, don't do the whole P to Jelly. That's too long. P Jelly. Just Jelly or Phenderson or Fen, whatever you want. It's not the parent name my parents gave me, so I'm fine. It's not my government name, so choose whichever one you want. That's fine.
I'll go with Ben because that also makes me feel cool. So let's go.
Okay, yeah, people like Fen. I think who started calling me that? I think it was like Daniel Jose Older. Started calling me Fen, and then I swear everybody after that was like Fen. So
I like that because I'll be like, yeah, I was on live with Fen, and like people like, you don't know Fen like this. I'm like, I really don't, but me and Daniel call Peach Jelly call Fen. Anyway, so selfish.
Should I be? Oh, I'm sorry. Did I get a question? I didn't hear.
Yeah. So if you feel comfortable doing a self-introduction for anybody who's reading, yeah.
I'm sorry. Your audio went in and out there first. So, hi guys. I'm P. Jelly Clark. The P stands for Phenderson, which was my grandfather's name, which is how I took that name. Nobody names their children old British names anymore like that, which is good. I'm a writer of speculative fiction. I've written several short stories as well as novellas, including The Black God's Drums, Ring Shout, and the novel A Master of Jinn. And I'm here to talk about middle grade stuff. My middle grade novel, which of course I don't have in front of me. Yeah, there it is. Abeni Song, which was my foray into middle grade. So here's the plot twist. I wrote that before I wrote anything else that people have read with me that's been published in book form. So it's actually one of my older stories that my agent said, hey, let's do this other stuff first and let's come back to that. And I'm glad I did. And I'm working on book 2 right now. I'm in the final late pass copy edits of book 2 because it's a trilogy.
Oh, yay!
Yeah.
So when I was reading that question, like, oh, what was the transition to middle grade? I was like, Ben is going to tell me he wrote this one first, and that's exactly what happened.
First one. It was like I always think back like the time when I was the most avid reader was during those years, right? I was like in elementary going into middle school. And that was when, I'm reading, I don't know, Wrinkle in Time. I'm reading Beverly Clearly, The Mouse and the Motorcycle. I'm reading my Danny Duns for anybody from Asian people here who remember those books. And I'm sitting there under the covers. I'm reading my Judy Blume because, I'm trying to figure out girls. So I'm reading that stuff. And I'm like under the covers trying to read. I was just reading so much during that period that I wanted to write stories for kind of like for my younger self, right? A story that I would have found interesting that I couldn't find at that time. Which reminds me, of Cam's book, which I had the fortune of reading, and wow, right? That book would have been great for me, right? As during that awkward age where you're trying to find yourself, because Charlie's story is so much about, the daydreaming, that's me. That's me walking around like Charlie in Cam's book, just constantly daydreaming about things. So yeah,
it's
really
funny you say that because I finished Abeni's Song today. I'm thinking I'm always trying to get my daughter to get into geek mode with me because she's an avid reader.
Yeah.
But I want her to be that person, who's thick into at some point Lord of the Rings. We can get to it.
Yeah.
But she is West African, and this is like her. This would be something that she can dive right into. She'll get some of the context there as well. So this is, I think, going to be my first kind of inch towards, hey, pick up this book. I think you might like it. Just turn to the first page.
I love that. You say your daughter is West African as if you're...
Yeah, so she's for us in the house, it's my daughter. She's my stepdaughter though. So her family is from West Africa, from Burkina Faso. And so when I married her mom, I got the whole package.
Yay.
Yeah,
Insta family.
Yep. Level up.
I love reading comments while we do this, so there'll be some of me doing that. So one tweeters and planners says, I love the bluey shirt. So We're
Oh,
all here for the Bluey shirt.
that is I
Um,
girl twin girls, and it's right now it's all Bluey. It's Bluey. It was Peppa Pig before. Now it's Bluey everything. So
Yes, was there
yeah.
panic in your house when everyone thought that that last season was the last season?
no, they don't understand seasons yet. So just watch the same one. I want to see that Bluey. What they understand is I want to see episode 30 from season 2. That's how they understand. They don't understand that there might be a time when the new ones would come out. There's so many short 7-minute episodes. They're
Yeah.
good. Yeah. Let's keep them innocent now. We're not going to talk about seasons and cancellations and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
That
No, no.
stuff.
Wait till the 13.
And I get an obsession. My niece is deeply into the Diary of a Wimpy Kid, and it's
Ah.
yeah.
Yeah.
She's like, oh my god, I can't wait for the next book. Anyway, so there is that one. Overcoming Mom Guilt says I had that one referring to Abeni song and loved it. So yay! If you have questions, comments, insights, please drop them into the chat. I will bring them into the conversation, and you know, in time. So be patient with me. So my first question for the two of y'all, I set these questions in advance of full disclosure. Abeni Song and Daydreamer feature young characters grappling with immense challenges, which makes for very compelling storytelling. How do you think their journeys resonate with today's youth, especially those from marginalized communities?
Yeah. Can I'll have you take that one first?
Oh, okay, sure. I'll jump.
You're welcome.
I'll jump into the bullet. Yeah. Uh, so I think a couple of different things. Like one of the messages in Daydreamer is to know what real love looks like, what real love feels like. And that's one of the things you're dealing with. You're always dealing with the expectations of the parents and the adults around you. And you do so much, you jump through so many hoops trying to figure out who that you are, who's always changing. You know, as a child, you are going to be changing. And I think it's the parents, the adults who have to learn that's happening, just be okay with it, and the teachers too. And so, part of that process for Charles is knowing what he can let go, what he can let go of, what he needs to let go of, and find his own place without having to worry so much about the expectations of people who have their own stuff going on. And all the adult characters have their own things going on. The folklore characters and the parental characters, all of them do. And he he has to find a place where he feels okay. And then also the people around him have to see him in a different light. And so that's a whole process for both the adults and for the kids, knowing who you're going to be, which is always a hard thing to do, particularly if you're someone who is, in this case, for Charles, kind of dyslexia, where everything feels extra difficult. The expectations that are put on him are extremely high, and there's no way to meet them without doing a little bit of damage to yourself. So he's learning how to get around that. He's learning how to be okay. And again, for the parents and people around him to also give him the love and support that he needs. It's a learning process for everybody. So I hope that is something that comes across, that you will find your own place with love and support. It's going to happen.
Yeah, and that's so true. I mean, not just of our younger people, but like for adults ourselves, like understanding ourselves, understanding that we change in our dynamics, and like kind of being able to understand our own boundaries so we can communicate that to those we love.
Yeah, I think that was what's so good about reading Daydreamer was that when I read it, I wasn't even thinking like I'm reading a middle grade book. I read it as just a book that I would read as an adult because it had those themes that spoke to me, and you actually went into some very PG and PG-13 beyond themes, which I think is really great because when I was younger, one of the reasons I like Wrinkle in Time, for instance, because when I read it, I felt like, oh, I'm reading a grown-up book, right? I'm reading these some deeper themes in here that they're dealing with that is not the simple themes that it's not talking down to me. So I thought that was great. And so, and my book, Abeni's Song, is not set in our world. It's set in this secondary fantasy world that's very modeled after West African, but also a lot of African diaspora culture. I bring in a lot of that because it's my fantasy world. I can do anything I want with it, right? It's not a real place, but it is definitely based in those cultural elements. And it's this young girl, Abeni, who lives in this small village that nobody's ever heard of in the middle of this forest, and she's never heard of the outside world, and she could care less. And it's her birthday. That's the only thing that matters to her. Until, of course, things go awry, right? And a witch shows up and basically says, you know, like, your village is doomed and things are going to happen, and I'm done protecting you guys, and you have to pay me for the protection racket I've been doing on your spot, right? And what I paid in is one child that you have to give me, right? And that child, of course, is dun 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 dun. It's Abeni. And so before you know it, Abeni's, you know, village has been attacked by these monstrous warriors who can magic, and she is now living in this witch's house, which is its own magical type house. And then she basically is now, I don't want to give away spoilers, but she's going to basically put in certain positions that are not what she might think of as her younger self. And so it's really interesting because when the story starts off, all she's interested in is growing up. And she's going to get that in spades, right? Where she's going to be forced to grow up in ways that she's not expecting. And part of this is like, part of the great themes there is what happens when a kid has to take on these really serious and very, at times, very adult situations, when she starts realizing, like, I'm a kid, I need somebody to take care of me, right? And so she's wrestling with that. She's also wrestling with that coming of age under these harrowing times, but as well dealing with, I think back about the things you start realizing, like grown-ups lie, right? You realize those kinds of things, and she, you know, she's dealing with the fact that part of what's happening to her in her village is that she's been told, like, she's not been told the truth, and she's going to be dealing with the witch who's also lying to her. So that's like a theme that runs throughout, her trying to deal with the fact that she has this pent-up anger in what's happened to her in her village and the situation she's been put into. She kind of blames many of the adults in her life for what's happened, and she has to deal with that as well as dealing with all of these other factors, right? And so, unlike, you know, this isn't a story where she has to deal with going to school and those kinds of things, where people might be able to have a one-on-one connection. But I think there are themes in there about growing up, about taking responsibility, and about, you know, just having that anger that you get when you're younger and you don't know what to do with it, when you're angry at the authority structures around you and all of that, or you lose faith in them at times. It's about a lot of those kinds of things. And then her dealing, you know, with her own self and understanding. A great inspiration is, as much as it has certainly these strong African themes. And by the way, that's another thing I wanted to do. I grew up reading a ton of fantasy, and I can't, it's not even I can list on one hand the amount that I would see with covers with people of African descent, or, you know, I just didn't. They just did not exist. Now they exist. Now thankfully there's a lot of them, and I'm thankful, right? There's so many. You can now walk in middle grade and YA with this, and just so anyone who's older will tell you that just did not exist. And so one of the other themes there that I wanted to do, even though there are a lot of people doing it, is to show, for so many young people who are into fantasy, young Black readers who are into fantasy and all these things, so, hey, like, I know you like Lord of the Rings, but look, we can do one too, right? And we can have fantasy, and we can tell these different and interesting stories, right? So certainly that was that's one of the big things I wanted to get across.
Yeah, and two things about that. I mean, one, I taught from kindergarten all the way to high school, and I think still my favorite age is that middle grade, that middle school age, because that's where you get the most chaos. And those random things are going to come out of their mouth. And every once in a while, I'll run into one of my students. I'm like, wow, one, you're taller than me, which is not cool. But two, you know, so if I see them, they're still asking the same kinds of questions. You know, they're still learning things, because now they're in their 20s, which is like a different level of learning things. And I can still have that conversation, that which I couldn't have when they were in third grade or when they were fourth grade. But now I start to get up in there. I can talk to them about these things. And with middle grade books, you know, these are the kind of books where they can start to broach those subjects in ways that I think sometimes parents say, oh, no, let's just give them something younger, even though they'll read whatever you put in front of them that they think is good. And it could be Lord of the Rings, it could be Game of Thrones, but let's not. But, you know, the thing is that there are different ways that they can get to those really serious ideas and do it in a way that's fun, do it in a way that's exciting, and still talks to them. It has their face on the cover as well.
Yeah. One of my fact I was going to say was Spirited Away. Right? The anime Spirited Away was like a big inspiration for this. And I love the story of a young girl who gets thrown into the spirit world, right? And then she has to deal with those kinds of things. And I just thought that that would have spoken to me, my younger self, if I was that young when I'd watch that. Yeah.
Oh, that's because when I read it, and I'm for those of you who are like, "What's Spirit Away?" I'm dropping the link in the chat.
Yeah.
It felt like
If
a
you feel
West
that, you can watch it. You
African,
can watch it for free. Subscription.
um, West African, Alice in Wonderland,
Yeah.
like with the Wizard of Oz. I was here for it. I just want to read some of the comments. So, this is Muse Nice. I'm going to read this. It'll be good for my inner child. I 100% agree. I think I agree with everything that you both said about both books. And I think what I object the most is that the antagonists are so nuanced that I felt like for a reader, it was deepening my sense of empathy, like for myself and for people who are maybe like, why did they do this? Why did they like, why? And it's just like, oh, I mean, like, now that I have their story, now that I have a sense of their background, I can understand why they did this. And that was like a parallel experience in reading both the books. So thank you. Okay, second question, which we kind of dove into. So, Fen, as you were saying earlier, you've published Ring Stout, you've published The Black Goddess Drums. Most recently, you've published The Dead Cattail Assassins. I guess.
Good title.
How was the transition from to publishing middle grade or from starting in middle grade and then writing non-middle grade?
Oh, yeah. So, like I said before, like I think I pointed out that I'd actually written this even before all of those things. And so this was when I was hungry and I was just writing and I had ideas. So I was all over the place. I was like writing horror, science fiction, fantasy, middle grade. I was writing whatever. You have that passion before you get contracts and they wear you down. Right? Back then, your imagination was just firing. And before I had children and, I had a ton of time on my hands. And so, um, for me, I suppose what I'll say is whenever I'm writing anything, I have to get into that world, that understanding. If I'm writing a Master of Jin, for instance, I can't go back and edit Ring Shout because the voice is so different. The themes are so different. The characters are so different. The world is different. And so what I tend to do is, like, if I have to do another thing, I'll be like, okay, I can't do that right now. I need to focus on this. And so for doing a Benny song, I just had to get into the mind state of I'm writing a middle grade. What is this going to sound like? What kind of word choices? Cam probably talk like I want to make sure that I'm not talking down to the readers, these younger readers, but I also don't want to do things that are things that adults might find more interesting, right? So for instance, I had a whole intro that I loved, right? It has to do with the witch and it has a backstory. And I'll always remember my editor at Tor, with Starscape, this imprint tour that I'm with, she was like, I love this. It's great. You got to cut it. I said, what? She said, this would be perfect for us as adults in a movie. He said, this is not what the kids want to see. Right. And I had to so that was like the harder process of doing that because I'm used to in the adult book, I just do what I want. Right. And then this one, I had to rein myself in, still allow my imagination to fly. Luckily, I like throwing humor and stuff. So having spaces for humor and then really trying to get in touch. I mean, it sounds cheesy, but touch with that younger self. Like, what was it like? How was it making friends, right? Like, what was the hardness at times of making friends? Like, and Cam has it. How do you have characters and they have antagonists around them? So Benny meets these two spirit girls and one of them is very friendly and the other one is, kind of hard to get along with that kind of person. Right. And it's like, what was that like? How did I deal with that kind of stuff when I was younger? And so, yeah, those were the challenges, getting into that headspace in order to put this on the page. Yeah.
I just want to make a quick announcement. So if you're joining, we are discussing Abeni song and Daydreamer with the authors. Also, if you click this little white button here, if you're enjoying this conversation, you can follow Sistah Sci-Fi, B. Clark, and Rob Cameron, Dragon of Brooklyn. Is your Instagram. Okay, awesome. So I just wanted to make that announcement before Rob, you answer. Rob, I have a question for you. So in our interview, I saw the video on your website. You state that you wrote Daydreamer as a love letter to your younger self, which I thought was such a beautiful sentiment. Can you elaborate more on that?
Sure. So, full disclosure, I am narcoleptic and ADHD, and so those two things, which we did not know years ago, were connected. They are, and so one kind of bounced against the other. When I was in third grade, my third grade teacher, whose name is Miss Sargent, uh, she worked really hard to try and get me classified as special ed, and it was maybe because I was the only black child in the class. I think in the grade actually at that point. And my mom had to work really, really hard for me to take tests and show that my IQ was high enough and I'm actually paying attention, even if it looks like my brain is elsewhere. My brain, I really was elsewhere. I mean, it would be like there'll be moments where a full 20 minutes would go by, and it'll feel like 5 seconds for me, and then they moved on. I'm like, what's going on? And so like this was me at that point. And I remember when I was in 12th grade, I was taking AP courses, and I think on one of our first tests in English, I got the highest score in the class. And one of my classmates, who I'd been with since third grade, he turned around and looked at me as if I had suddenly had three heads. And it was at that moment I realized he thought I was an idiot this entire time. And then going back and thinking about all the different ways that I felt different, I was different, and didn't quite catch on as to why. I was okay with it because I have supportive parents who were there, and also I can read, so that was my out. I was able to get out. But it took a while to get to that point and understand what that was. And then over the last, I want to, again, like over my many years teaching, I've had so many students who are classified as dyslexic or have something that's connected to it. And I see where those support structures aren't there. And I can see it sometimes at home at the parent-teacher conferences where the parents just don't get it. Or maybe the teachers just don't get it. And so trying to connect them and say, no, your kid, they're not disabled. They're just seeing the world in a different way. That was my story for years. But again, my mom saying, no, I know exactly who you are. So with that support, that love and affection, I can put the love that's there into the book, but I can also see, how it can go wrong. And I want to show both of those things at the same time, where you can have the support, but maybe it's just not enough. And still, as a child, you have to figure this stuff out on your own. So what are you going to do? Where are you going to find your solace, your power? For Charles, it's his imagination. For Charles, it's the stories that the dragon tells him. And that fills him up for a while, but at some point, everyone has to grow up and change. And then when you do change as a child, becoming something else, then you have to deal with these people who aren't quite ready for you to change. And of course, all the different consequences of the world that you live in. And the world that he lives in is one where, it's the 1980s. So there are things that are going on in the community, which are always going to be a problem for anybody, but particularly for him, it also becomes an issue.
Yeah. And I loved watching Charles's journey. I consider myself dyslexic. I was never formally tested for it, but I don't think as a young child, like anybody was like, oh, you're dyslexic. Here's some resources. I think I just had to realize this is how I move in the world of language. It was good to read Charles's story, and his self-awareness and the way he was able to tap into self-empowerment. So that's a beautiful love letter to yourself and all the youngest readers out there, or middle grade readers out there. Yeah. So Fen, back to you. We'll alternate. Feel free to respond to each other's questions to make this more fun.
Hey, I thought you were talking about Charlie. I thought I want to talk about, and when we get a chance, talk about the relationship with his mother, which I thought was that was an interesting relationship because it's a loving relationship, but it's also strained by all these things. And then he can't tell her about life. And then probably most relationship, him and Glory, right? That was you went in there with ideas of abuse and corporal punishment, but him still really loving Glory and whatever Glory's problems were because he's an old head or whatever. But that was a really interesting dynamic, which I was like, wow, this is, it was something else to read.
I appreciate that, man. Yeah. I'll be honest, I try not, for any antagonist, I don't look to make any one person antagonist. I don't look into my life and say, oh, this is a horrible person, I'm going to put them in my book, because I've seen it go wrong in so many different ways in my own family and my students. There's enough there to say, okay, these are the warning signs for abuse, because there's another character in the book, he is a villain,
Yeah.
and his abuse is really, really clear. So it's very easy for Charles to see this is a problem. But when it comes to is this just the glory, it takes a while for him to figure it out because ultimately, truly, the adults that actually in his life do truly love him, and so it's hard to make that distinction. It's almost impossible, really.
They themselves don't seem to know how to show forms of affection and care without, using that type of abuse as part of it, which is what makes Glory's character so complex. Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed. Okay. So next question, I was like, where am I in the question? My next question is, in Ebony's song, how did you so start off, it is fictional, not based off of a real place or history, but there are themes that
Oh yeah.
feel familiar and reminiscent for those familiar with West African history, culture, and lore. So in light of that context, how did you balance the darker themes, or did you balance the darker themes of colonization and loss with moments of hope and empowerment in the story?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, you're definitely right. There are themes of There's definitely an allusion to slavery here. Going There are themes. I don't want to give it away, but there are themes to child soldiers and things that are going on here. And so I wanted to talk about those things, but also intersperse them within this magical world. So there's also a giant mimic salamander, and that's a giant whimsical salamander that you can ride. And whatever he touches, if he touches wood, he becomes wooden, right? If he touches carpet, he'll become carpet. Grass, he gets grassy, right? So it was trying to balance those two, and it's always interesting. Like, how do I tell these deeper themes that I want to go into, that I want the kids to get, that I want any reader to get, but I also want to make it fun to show that this world is magical, right? And I call it my public enemy type thing. But I'm older enough that I used to listen to Public Enemy, and the reason that Flavor Flav was there is because Chuck was so heavy that Flavor Flav you that light balance, right? So whether it was ring shout or what have you, like, in the middle of talking about the Klan and ring shout, I have them in a juke joint because I like to show that the world is all of those complex things, right? While there are terrible things going on, there are there's also good. There's some good in the world, Mr. Frodo. There's also some good going on around them. So yeah, I tried to have that balance, so that it doesn't overwhelm people. I don't want people to come away depressed. I want this to be a story about triumph. Even if there's tragedy, I want people to come off like, fight these things. And Benny,
Oh, sorry. Oh, no, I was going to say, Phenderson, I hope there are librarians and teachers watching who pick up a Benny song because a lot of times we're talking about social studies, it gets pushed aside, so it ends up being we talk about it during the English language arts. And so this would be a book you want to put down, read, and then now we're going to stop. We're going to talk about this. Now we're going to do some research on this. Now we're going to have a conversation about those things that are actually going on. This is the kind of book to do it and do it well.
yeah.
I really appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, holistic. I'm like all the lessons learned they could do. But yeah, I'm not a teacher. I'm sure that there are librarians, teachers, and students that will advocate for this type of lesson planning in the classrooms watching. So I'm excited to see.
By the way, I think my author site has a study guide that was put together, right? So there's even a guide on how to talk about some of these things, both the whimsical things. You can, have the kids. Like, I've done things where I visit the kids and I just have them imagine, the witch's Asha's house it looks like this small little little house, thatched roof. When you go inside, it's magically much larger, like a TARDIS or something. And there's rooms that you don't know where they're going to lead, right? You open up with one room and a bunch of water can come out or snow or something, and the doors change. And so students had a great time imagining what was in those rooms, right? And so I had some students just try to think about, if I open up this room, like one of them was like, I can find my lost childhood. And I was like, wow, you got a little meta. Right? And people were
Especially
finding, like the rooms with just these things that they could, or places they can go to escape. And so it was interesting watching, pull from what I started and then adding their own, right, ideas of what the rooms could show. I was like, wow.
no, I love that
Great role
overcoming
play.
mom overcome
Yeah,
I would do it. Overcoming Mom Guilt says, I write curriculum for kids in virtual schools. It can be tough to integrate these new dynamic texts into curriculum when you're not doing traditional brick and mortar schools. But overcoming mom guilt, I know you got this. So, yeah. You were saying, Rob?
Oh no, we're just saying that what he was talking about, it's a role play. It's like a D&D role play. You get to write in, you just say, here's who I am. I'm a jaguar. I can turn to a jackal or turn whatever creature you want, and that gives you the whimsy. But also, as I was reading this, there are things in there that are definitely for the adults. So there's the kung fu.
yeah,
I was like, all right, I know what he's watching. I know what he's watching.
yeah. You notice that, yeah.
I was like, but yes, the training, yes.
Training
Okay.
montage.
And if you're like, what are they talking about? We have an answer for that. You can read the book. The audiobooks are amazing. They're fire. They're available on Libro FM. They're available at Libby. And I think we have posts about Sister Sci-Fi. I post about that if you want to listen to a sample. And if you're on the Sister Sci-Fi email list, I'll find the reading guide and include that in the next email blast, which will go out hopefully tomorrow. Okay. Charles, who is like the daydreamer, and we kind of talked about this, is neurodivergent. What was the process for you with writing a character? And I use the term disability, which Rob, I took your correction earlier, so let me know what term you prefer for me to use differently.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, the thing is that with the term disability, it has a heavier meaning. It has a legal definition, it has a medical definition, all these different things. Neurodivergence, it's still somewhat of a term of art, and so you can talk about specific categories like dyslexia, like ADHD, like being on the spectrum, which are kind of gathered into what we can think about as neurodivergence. But you can think of it more or less. You can think of it more of a kind of mismatch. I think with society, the way that their brain works, it does work, but it's very very specifically designed for something that does not work as well in a regular school setting. This we're talking about language and dyslexia. My degree is in linguistics, so this is something that I've studied, particularly the neuro side. Is that when we think about the written word, it is something that from language to language it's different, and so you might get different kind of dyslexia. The whole idea of reading is an evolutionary technology. Most of us growing up, well, humans didn't need to read for a very long time. So this thing now that we are forced to do, that everyone has to do, it does create some barriers, which in some ways are necessary, particularly now that we have technologies that do allow you to get around some of the issues with dyslexia. But when I was writing this, I was writing about Charles. I was thinking about my students as well and seeing just kind of what makes them who they are. And it's not the dyslexia itself that makes them who they are. It's everything else. This is one thing that creates pressures for them. They can't ignore it, but it's not the end all and be all of who they are. Charles is an artist. Charles is just a really good son. Charles tries his best to be a really good friend. He's always trying his best to try and figure out what other people need, and he does so in a way so often that it becomes second nature, and sometimes actually that's a problem for him, trying to get over that, understanding you have to think about yourself a bit. So when talking about dyslexia, yes, or neurodivergent person, we just think about it as just being one part of what makes them who they are. It's going to be the thing that may create the most pressure for them, but it's not the only thing. And I put this in the 1980s again because we didn't know as much about the situation we're in right now, but now we do. We know so much more. And my coworkers in the school that I work in, the majority of them now we say, oh, okay, I get what this is. But still, every once in a while, I'll run into a teacher that says, oh, no, they're just lazy, and I can correct them, and they take the correction. But now there's so many different ways that we can connect to students, connect to children. And at the end of the story, I don't want to give too much away, but he does end up in a better place than when he started. There is, not everything is solved,
by the way,
but is a different place.
I thought that was really unexpected at the end. I don't want to give it away either. But I was like, oh, wow.
Yes, but for all of y'all, there's a very satisfying ending. So I just want to bring in the comment. So Tanya says the term I've seen people use as well is neurospicy, which is a term I've seen as well.
I like that.
Spicy.
Some of my kids can't handle spice, so I don't know. They can't. No pepper for them. They can't do it.
And another comment is, I love the increase in representation of neurodivergence in Black books. It helps fight against the stigma and quell stereotypes.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Because that is again, and it's not just the school. Oftentimes it's the parents. Like, no, my kid's he's just slow, or he's just lazy, and that's not the case. It's just their mind is just going in a different direction. They're paying attention to different things, and they'll do better in a different environment and different place. But there's definitely always something going on there. I told a story. I had a child. This isn't even about dyslexia. Just how do you deal with stresses? I had a child who didn't speak English. And as I transitioned from one unit to the next, from math to something else, she had her math book on her lap, and she had turned away from me, and she's teaching to an imaginary person in the classroom. And I'm calling her name, saying, "Hey, we changed, we moved on," but she's into it. Her brain has just said, "No, I'm doing this right now," and it's okay. I can laugh about it. It's not a big deal. It's funny, and she just a little bit embarrassed. But some teachers, some parents might look at that and say, "Oh, here's the problem." And I have parents like that who say, "Oh, they're a problem because they're doing this," and that's not the way it is anymore.
I love it. I love that gentleness and grace. So I'll bring in another comment. So Overcoming Mom Guilt says, same. It's so beautiful to know that my son will be able to see himself in literature. He loves to read. For those of you who just joined, I'll pause to make this announcement again. We're discussing Abeni Song and Daydreamer with Phenderson Clark and Rob Cameron. If you're not already following these accounts, you can click this little white arrow here and follow the accounts of everybody on the slide if you are enjoying the discussion and want to connect with us. Okay. Fan, you mentioned this earlier. So this Ebony Song is book one of a trilogy.
Yeah.
And book two comes out in 2025, which is scarily just around the corner.
Yeah.
What can we look forward to? Like, was Asha still there? Like, yeah.
So I guess what you can really look forward to in the second book is, I think the first one is really about Abeni being in this small forest, even though she's left her small little village. It's being out in this forest and then leaving the forest for the first time and encountering a smaller, different village. But this is a world, as I hint in here, of whole kingdoms and states. And basically, Abeni is about to be the country bumpkin come to town, right? She's about to be thrust into a much larger, she's going to realize how much bigger the world is. She's actually going to see cities for the first time. And the larger antagonist, the witch priest, and all of this, the witch priest has a daughter, a mortal daughter, who is sent to hunt down Abeni. And so we're going to also get different character perspectives, because we get this other character who's a little older, who is, been sent to hunt down Abeni and Asha and everyone. So it is a much broader, it's called Abeni and the Kingdom of Gold. As they come across this kingdom that's very much based on the Asante. If anybody knows, it's very much based on them. And I get to introduce gold spinning, which is, think of it like gold bending, where like you can turn gold into liquid and do what you want with it, in a sense. So think of it like if there's gold bending. I don't know if the Airbender has a gold bending, but I got gold bending in here. And so
I think I saw that. So kind of like Rumpelstiltskin-ish.
Like the last Airbender, where they can bend fire, earth, and water, but this is with gold, right? And so they can liquid.
Are there hand symbols?
Metal. So yeah, and they can make that, except they use more African rhythm. That's all to do it. But anyway, so there's going to be a lot. There are new antagonists, new monsters, and just the stakes are much higher, right? It's no longer the forest, but I'm now out into the world, and you realize that there's a war going on, right? And the dangers of that war. Yeah.
Okay. I'm excited.
Get a little deeper.
Rob, similar question for you. Two parts. How have your students responded to Daydreamer? I'm sure that they've read it and loved it and devoured it, but how have
Well, I
you
mean,
responded?
it only came out August 6th, so they were on summer vacation. And yeah, so and technically I'm not allowed to say, hey, here's my book to my students. But some of my co-teachers have bought the book, and then one of my co-teachers, he has like the cover, in his windows, like so that kids walk by and say, oh, what's that? Like, oh, well, let me tell you about this. Actually, what's funny thing is my daughter, it's like the oldest one, she's like, well, Dad, am I getting a copy? I was like, yeah, you're getting a copy. And I gave her one, and she came back I think next week and said, so can I buy like 5 copies of my book so I can give them to your friends? I'm like, well, it'd be great. So we talk with their parents. Maybe they buy the book, you can give it to them. But yeah, so my mom, I think she's reading it because I'm her dad. Because definitely, like usually, like sometimes we read the same books. Usually, it's like the graphic novels we read together. So I'm hoping that this gets her into start reading some more of the geek stuff like me. But well, we'll see. But she liked it so far.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my daughters have been reading since they're like 2 or 3, and
Mhm.
so they parents try to read Abeni. So I'm like, it's a little much for you right now. You just turned 6. Let's just give it a
Oh,
year
Yeah, a little bit of time.
to get to
You
this.
know,
They really want to read it. And I'm like,
that's
it's funny. I think there are things I thought that would be scary for her, but I forgot that when she was 4, we would watch the Labyrinth
no.
before she went to bed, and
Oh,
that's
you know,
yeah. And she was
that's
like, and she was into it, like the fiery dance with people taking their heads off. I'm like, are you
yeah.
sure? You want to sure? Yes, Daddy. Keep play. I'm like, okay, well. Yeah, so now actually, when I think of Daydreamer,
Yeah,
for the most part, when was starting writing it, I was thinking about like everybody here's a Muppet. Like when I go into the dream world, it's Jim Henson all the way.
that's hilarious.
oh,
And
right.
scary as heck. What are you talking about? If you think about it,
Yeah.
Jim Henson, yeah.
Yeah. No, they're very intense. I love all that. Um, how did research impact the development of the stories that you crafted in these books? And that question is for both of y'all.
Mm. You want to take this one? You want to take this one first? Tag.
Yeah. And for mine, I still have folders of it. It was a lot of. I want to know as much African cosmology, African folklore. I want to find out all the monsters are. I was like, I want the African ogres, right? And I know about these European orcs. What do we got here? Playing with, and so that was a lot of fun. Where I really got to do what you're supposed to do in fantasy, right? Where you can take aspects of these culture and rethink them, right? So I have like the Bat Riders are based on an actual West African mythology,
Mm.
West African folklore, but I tweaked it to make it something else, right? Rather than the giant bat with claws that can grab you out of the tree, I made them people who actually ride these bats, and so yeah, it was the research was fun, right? That was probably the most fun in doing just doing a lot of research to figure stuff out, but also when you're doing a secondary world, one of the great things is that you can just create it, right? And so, whereas if I'm doing a story in my world, and I have to figure out what year was this done in, and like how fast can a car go in 1915? Yeah, I don't have to do any of that for this. It's a full secondary world. I can just do what I want. So that was fun.
What about Bush Babies? Is that based off of? I don't know why they were so compelling to me, but I was like, I love these Bush
Yeah, the
Babies.
Bush baby thing is based off of like also a bit of folklore that I also tweaked. I like the in here I make them like where they can steal your body in a sense. They're like catchers. And so yeah, it was me finding the folklore and then saying, how can I incorporate this into this fantasy world? Like, I mean, like Tolkien did, right? Like he goes in and he finds elves and he said, okay, I'm not gonna make little cute elves. I'm gonna make these, otherworldly elves, and I'm not gonna make little goblins. I'm gonna give you full on monstrous orcs, right? So he goes in and he finds ways to take that folklore and then refashion it into like how we do modern fantasy telling. And so I was doing a bit of that, but also trying to be respectful. Like, for instance, my book doesn't name gods. Like, if anyone noticed, I never name a god. I tend to talk about spirits more. I did that on purpose. Not that I have a problem when people do that. I love when people do and they bring in orishas or what have you. But I didn't want to, even though the names like are definitive, like Abeni, people are like, oh, you got that's an Igbo name, right? At the end of the day, though, I wanted to still create cultures that were definitely you understood that I'm not in Middle Earth. Right? I'm not in Westeros. This is definitely an African type setting, but I also want to make it so that a lot of different people could engage it, right? So they didn't feel like when I'm reading this distinctly, from this certain cultural point because I see this cosmology mentioned. I wanted to open it up a bit. Though the second book, because I'm using the Ashanti as a definite thing, as people definitely see that, but even there, I tried to be really careful about how I did it, where even though that's what I'm pulling on, you okay, that's like he's using that as the inspiration, but it's something different, right? And so
Yeah. No one's gonna come back and actually so this is the way it's pronounced.
I had somebody actually me. They were like, because you're mixing and matching all of these African cultures together, don't you think that's problematic? And I said, well, two things. One, African cultures often mix and match with themselves. So one thing is we have to break from is that people who lived in parts of West Africa were just sitting in their little enclaves and they weren't having trade networks and things. When the Portuguese arrive in West and Central Africa, they are bringing cultures from the Americas and it's intermingling. And I said, at the end of the day, I'm a product of the slave trade diaspora. So my very blood is an intermixture of various West and Central African cultures. And so, yeah, I got actually, but I got answers.
Yeah. Also, it's your book. So,
yeah. I just want to say, hey, Ronaldo Anderson, thanks for joining. And that's it. Rob, your thoughts?
Oh, yeah. So I actually, since you gave us the documents in advance, so I kind of knew. If anybody's interested in some of these books, definitely take a look. So this is American folklore. So that means that's Black folklore, it's Irish folklore, all of it, all the people who came here. So this is one of my favorite books, Fairy. I definitely was reading this for a bit of research.
Yeah.
I'll post these on. I'll post these on later on if you guys have not seen them before.
I've had that book. That's one of my favorite books. When I used to I have artist sketches which are literally from that book. I can't believe that somebody else has fairies here. All right.
Are you kidding? No, this is. I mean, some of it looks like Muppets. Like I know them. I know that when they were doing Labyrinth, they had to have been looking at this. There's no way they weren't looking at this and trying to create Labyrinth. It's just not possible. It's weird. Jabberwocky, also very fun. Is also mentioned in there. This kind of might be one of the villains. People Could Fly. This is actually, it's one of the books I used to teach. So I keep it around because it's just a gorgeous book. And it means something as being African American. This particular story is talking about the diaspora, what we brought with us. And that's an important part of Daydreamer as well, is that who are these creatures? So in Daydreamer, there are folklore creatures and they walk around and they skinwalk because they don't want to have to deal with humans. They got to live here in the city anyway. So, one of the things I talk about is how did they get here? Why did they look the way that they do now? What is their connection to what came before people? What were they before they were people were around? All this is part of the story as well, and makes a connection to African American folklore. And then another one, Jorge Borges, The Book of Imaginary Beings. This is a really cool find. If you guys have not seen it, you'll find some stories. So, like, there's a character in there called Humbaba. I got from this book. She is definitely a cuter version of what's in this book, but this is where she came from. My mom's from Belize, and so she told me that the thing that kept her out of the forests was Tata Duende. So Tata Duende is definitely in the story, but also there are other beings in there. This book is called Legends of Belize, Creatures and Books by Grissie G. and Dismas. I'll post this so you guys can see it. But there are 3 different creatures from here that also made it into the book. And non-folklore books. There's a lot of stuff that was non-folklore, but this one was particularly pivotal. The children, sorry, there are no children here. This is a the story of these two kids growing up in Chicago, the 1970s, late six, no, in the 70s, and kind of their life trying to get out of the ghetto and how it did not work for them. But, a lot of stuff that happened. Some of the things that happened in Daydreamer are kind of pulled from some of the, like, the historical context is pulled from here, and of course my own life too. Like, there's a part of the story where Charles gets electrocuted. That actually did happen to me. So
You
don't play
stuck
with electricity.
fork into the electric socket or a knife?
It was I can't recall exactly
You,
what piece of metal it was, but it just fit perfectly into the outlet. And then I touched it again,
oh my God.
and yeah. So again, do not play
You
with
give
electricity. But it does make for good story fodder. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff in there. A lot of research went into the stories because, like, books like this are a research hole. Particularly with Alice Miller. If you don't know who Alice Miller is, just the ideas around how we treat children and how that's changed over time and reasons why. In some cases, abuse was considered good child rearing. All in the book. Deep dive.
Hey, Cam, I was going to say, I'm glad you brought up Jabberwocky. So Jabberwocky was always one of my favorite poems. So it was
Mm.
why that becomes a central part of your story, the idea of the Jabberwocky. I've just loved it. I've loved the story. And it's really funny because recently I brought it up and somebody else was like, you know what the Jabberwocky is? I said, yeah, I know what the Jabberwocky is. In fact, here's a wild little aside. You remember the group Das Effects, the hip hop group Das
Yeah.
Effects? I used to
Yeah.
call their kind of rap, I used to call it Jabberwocky rap. Because if you think about how they rap, the biggity, and they like do these nonsense words. But if you listen really closely, by the way, to Das Effects, they're all using pop culture references from the 70s and 80s. Anyway,
Wow.
but I used to call it rap. The
Yep.
second thing is, since you pulled out the Book of Fairies, so a very long time ago, I used to actually do art, and the Book of Fairies was one of the places I sketched from. So here is from the Book of
Oh,
Fairies.
I can't
This
see it. All right, so you're gonna have to post a picture later. I can't see anything you're doing.
other one I did from the Book of Fairies, So it was, hey, you just took me. I had to like go looking in my old childhood sketch pad. You just took me back with that book.
Oh,
It was
listen,
great.
you tell you took me back with DOS effects. I was in orchestra from third grade all through high school, and there was one, I think it was 11th grade. We were allowed to bring in any music that we wanted. They would play, we would listen to it, and I brought in DOS effects. They
Yeah,
played it for 10 seconds, and they said nope, and they turned it off. They said nope, we're not listening to
tell
this. I'm
them
like, are you serious?
that is literature. They were doing Jabberwocky style
They didn't know.
creation in their work. I mean, it's art, right? And I think that's a good point. It's not appreciated for what it is. So anyway, there we go.
Okay.
DOS effects, if you're listening, we see you.
And straight from the sewers, that you're respected.
Respected. Ronaldo Anderson is also excited about Jabberwocky rap.
I see.
Yay! Okay, so we are winding down. Technically, we have 2 more minutes. So we're going to transition to my second favorite part of the live. My first favorite part is everything we've been doing thus far. I love hearing the two of y'all be in conversation together. It's literally making my Wednesday. So the first, this or that, dream powers or magic songs. These, this or that, are loosely inspired by your novels.
Making
Magic.
me choose.
I'm gonna have to take dream powers. I've always wanted to like walk people's dreams, as you know, in Abeni's song. One of the things there is that you can just walk people's dreams, and I always think that would be an interesting power. Though magic socks, I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued by magic socks.
The thing is, okay, look, I would do singing, but I'm a horrible singer. Give me you know what? Give me karaoke and I'll tear it up. So listen, yeah, give me karaoke powers. Yes, magic karaoke powers, and I'll do it.
But you
I'll do it.
only
I think I want to do that.
Wu-Tang Clan lyrics for your karaoke. You have to do every character. You have to do everybody in Wu-Tang. You have to do all of them. One song.
Why'd you make it hard? Okay, fine. Dream powers. Jesus.
I love it. I love it. Those are the best responses to the this or that question ever. So I love that. Next question: personal discovery or protecting others?
Say this again.
Personal discovery or protecting others?
Mm,
Well, I'm a parent, so I guess protecting others. But if you're gonna be like, you know, you have to have a little bit of self-discovery, right, to protect others. Otherwise, I don't know. It's just a hard. It's a
that's
hard one to pierce.
discovery. As a kid, I'm like, didn't we all want to walk into the wardrobe or walk through the portal and see something? But yeah, I would take protecting others too. At the end of the day, right? That's what the hero does. The hero
Yeah,
tries to protect, right?
yeah. That's a mature thing to
That's
do. Yes.
I actually think that's what I would. I mean, if it had to be, if I'm given the choice, I'd be like, can I jump through the portal, then come back and protect somebody?
Yeah.
But
Let's stop time. Go to Narnia. Do our thing. Check that. Come back. Okay.
yeah,
You come with. Oh, just they all come with me. No problem.
I'm like, there's a portal in my closet. I mean, come on.
Let's get out.
Yeah. I like that. So you can do personal discovery and protect others. Yes. Historical fantasy or contemporary magical realism?
Oh my goodness, historical fantasy, temporary magic realism sense.
Okay,
Well,
so like the thing is, I write my adult book is historical alternate weird western, alternate history weird western. So I just turned into my agent. So yeah, right. But this, I definitely want to get another book out of Daydreamer. It's supposed to be there's supposed to be a second book to it, a sequel. So I don't know. I don't know. I guess I'll do Daydreamer. I guess yeah, magical realism. Sure, I'll do another book.
oh man, now if I was like South American, like, I'd have to say magical realism. I was like Ben O something. That's the magical realism is. I love magical realism, but I often call it's what the literati when they read some fantasy and they want to say they read fantasy. I think I read magical realism. I think that is your
That's the truest thing I've heard ever. It's like, no, it was magical realism. I was like, there are witches and
Yeah,
what are you talking about?
magical realism has to be like a touch of magic, like Beloved maybe has some magical realism, but there's a whole dragon in there, homie. You are in fantasy, Beloved, and that's where you are. You just need to accept it. No, for me, I'm gonna say historical fantasy the rest of the day.
I'm just wondering how many people who say they finished 100 Years of Solitude actually finished 100 Years of Solitude.
Say it again.
How many people who said that they finished 100 Years of Solitude actually finished 100 Years of Solitude?
Well, I read The Amazing Life of Oscar. That's what I did.
Yeah, what the footnotes?
I love magical realism. I just read something by Ben O'Credis, and so I like the idea of it. It's just that I do think, part of genre itself has its own problems, and then the larger literary world, I don't want to go into it, has its genre itself. And I sometimes think that people are pushing that category so they can kind of say, well, no, I'm not
writing. I'm not writing genre. I'm just writing. Yeah. Wait. Are you saying to read it or to write it? Which one are you talking about, Isis? To read alternate history or write it?
However you want, however the question lands for you.
Oh, okay. I'll tell you, writing alternate history is a little easier. I feel like it's a little easier.
I have not met 100 people who finished Dahlgren. That's pretty funny. Everyone swears they did. Did I finish that? I can't remember. I know that I've had to go back to it several times. I'm like, 10 pages was like heavy. There was a lot. It was good, but it was like, okay, these are heavy 10 pages I just read. I'm gonna go back
30% into my Kindle version of it.
That's pretty funny.
No, agreed. So 2 more questions. Urban tales or African mythology?
African mythology.
African urban tales that are mythological. I'm just breaking all the rules.
Right all in the blender.
We can do that? We can break rules?
We can break the rules.
That is literally your sequel. That is your sequel. I mean, yeah.
You can do whatever you want. And last question. Okay, so I'm gonna ask this question. Is just the question. Okay.
Betting up.
Just in short.
You were winding up that pitch like it's gonna be a heavy question. Yeah.
It's just a question. Tristan Strong or Amari and the Night Brothers?
No,
So
you didn't. No, I refuse to answer the question on account of I know both them folks, and how dare you? How dare you? Oh.
So I read Kwame, so I know what that is. I haven't read the other one, so I can't compare the two. I can't compare them.
They are both fantastic books.
Yeah.
Is what they are. They are both fantastic books, and everybody should read both. And you were trying to start some mess with me. You kind of have some problems.
Some Kendrick Lamar stuff is going to pop up here. No.
It is literally just a question. Susie.
Carry that thing on him. I don't need them kind of problems.
Fair. We'll close with ZZ Claiborne's comment. I've been on page 314 of Dahlgren for 30 years. Heard. It's real out here in these streets.
That's a lot.
You got farther than I did. I will go back. I promise I will go back.
It's definitely, like Tanya says, it's some dense reading. Yeah.
Agreed. I had so much fun. Rob, thank you so much for making this happen.
Thank you.
I get to call Fen now. Thank you so much for saying yes. Hopefully I will be seeing you on the East Coast soon in some magical portal hopping type way. This is great. And
yeah, please do let us know when you're
Yep.
coming through. This is great. We do an event.
Providing a platform. Thank you for doing what you do. Thank you for pubbing all of these artists. Not everybody who, this is not me being the old grievance guy, but there are a lot of people who in the blurred geek space who say they want all this stuff, but they don't always pub this stuff as much as they pub the popular stuff. You know, I love the popular stuff too. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for knowing that if a Black book comes out with speculative fiction, that you are going to announce it. So thank you.
Yeah.
Try.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely. And also on the other coast, all the way in LA. Definitely appreciate you here.
Awesome. All right. Have a great rest of your week.
Everybody. All right. See you later, Cam. See everybody.
See you then.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, everyone. I am Isis with Sistah Sci-Fi, and I am here with Sistah Sci-Fi Wind Down Wednesday. Working hard to make Wednesday your new favorite day of the week. One day I'm going to do a whole montage of me saying that over the past, I think, 2 going on 3 years, like me with different earrings, same shirt, different shirt, all that good stuff. You might be thinking, tank top, that's different. I'm in Oakland, California. It is October 2nd. It is 92 degrees in this piece. I guess if you doubted it, global warming is real. Today, if you're on our email list and you follow our social media, you know that we are discussing Abeni song by P. Jelly Clark and Daydreamer by Rob Cameron, who has a couple other names. That's his pen name. So I'm so excited. These are both middle grade chapter books, which is a new space for me. You probably know P. Jelly Clark from Ring Shout, The Black God's Drums, and most